So before we start, a huge thank you, Mo, for being here today. Absolutely. I appreciate it more than you know. For anyone who hasn't kind of followed Mo's work, he's been flying around the world this last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Huge news around the work at your work in AI, and has literally stopped between Hong Kong and going back to London. You've detoured to be here this morning. So we massively appreciate that. As I said to you, the kind of format for today is for us to have a conversation as people who are all really passionate about the space, about people in this space. But before we do that, I think that despite your amazing CV and your profile, Mo, what is so impressive is when you understand your journey, your story, and what led you to be here today. That's the bit for me that was truly inspiring, motivating, and that I hope that everyone else leaves today, if nothing else, going, oh my goodness, I'm so inspired to take some action. So we're going to look at future workplace and wellness, but can we start by kind of going backwards and talking about where it all began and your journey, and how do you become Chief Business Officer of Google? Like, how does that happen?
Luck. No,
was it luck?
There was a big element of luck, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, there are two sides for it. I think my wonderful daughter constantly reminds me and says, you've been paid in advance. And I remember one pivotal event in my life that I actually rarely ever talk about in public, that completely shaped my approach to my career. And I tend to believe that life tests you in a way, right? Life puts you in small tests, and if you pass the test in a certain direction, it will give you a bigger test and a bigger test. Unlike what Spencer may think, because I appear to be very chill, I'm a very serious salesman. I sold incredible things in my life in a very unusual way. I very much like Spencer, actually, but basically 1992, I was just hired as a sales exec in IBM Egypt. I used to be a techie for a long time. I still am. But then my boss pulls me in a room and says, look, most of our salespeople sell air. They don't know what they're talking about. We want to run this new experiment of actually getting engineers to sell. So would you like to do that? So I went and I said, okay, let's do it. Gave me the education sector in which IBM was completely failing. And I didn't use my technical skills at all. I just became a salesman, a bad salesman, I'll say openly. I mean, I went to there was an earthquake in Egypt, 1992, and there was a tender, a document issued to re-establish basically funds, aid came from all over the world to rebuild educational buildings in Egypt. The government set up an entity called the Educational Buildings Organization, reporting to the Minister of Education. And the only condition for the funds were that everything is done electronically this time. So you get GIS systems and CAD systems, and everything is computerized. And IBM sucked at those things. We had mainframes and AS400s and data systems. Anyway, I went in and I did my shebang, and I ended up winning the deal. $4.2 million, which was quite big for my second deal in my career, and it was quite big by Egypt standards at the time. And 6 weeks later, I realized as an engineer, now that the salesman's hat was taken off, that none of that will work. None of it at all, as a matter of fact, other than the data parts of it, the PCs and the AS400s and so on. And so I started to struggle really deeply, because if this didn't work, the schools wouldn't be reconstructed after the earthquake, and I would be the reason for that.
No pressure then.
No pressure at all. And so I really struggled for a couple of weeks, and I started to work with all of the engineering sides of IBM to try and see if this will actually work at all. And eventually I woke up one day, walked to the office of the Minister of Education, 26 years old or 25 years old then. And I said, I'd like to meet the minister, please. And they said, and you are? And I said, I'm the IBM guy. And they said, but do you have an appointment? I said, no, but I'll wait. He must have a couple of minutes. That was 8 a.m. By 7:30 p.m., before he was going home, he was working out and said, "You're still here." And I said, "I really need to talk to you." And he sat me down and said, "What do you want?" And I said, "We sold you a $4.2 million deal. None of it is going to work. Okay? So I suggest you cancel my order and keep those machines. But I have also done my research. I think, if you want GIS systems, Silicon Graphics and those guys will do very well. If you want those, Sun Microsystems will do very well. Oracle will do very well on this. If you want me to connect you to the relevant salespeople, please let me know. But I really suggest that you cancel 3.2 million of the 4.2 million. Okay? And he said, "Are you for real?" I said, yeah. I just don't want to be the reason that schools don't get constructed. And he said, "Okay, let me think about this." Right? He calls me the next day and he says, "Okay, I worked with my team and we will cancel the order. Give me your contacts." So I gave him my contacts, like the rest of it and so on. And basically 6 weeks later, he calls me and gives me a direct order for $16 million.
No way.
$16 million. He sat me down and he said, "We need the following equipment. Tell me which of those you can provide better than the others and which you don't." Okay, I said, this and that we're the masters of. This and this, you go to this guy. This and that, you go to that guy. And it completely shifted my life. So EBO, the Educational Buildings Organization, for the next 5 years, gave IBM $10 to $15 million a year, right? And it completely shifted my perception, because when you go into IBM and they teach you about sales school and all of that, you realize that you can sell anything. Honestly, if you're a good businessman, you can sell anything. But should you sell anything? And I will promise you that for the rest of my career, I actually never really had to sell. I would sit with clients and say, "So what exactly is the problem?" And, I would miss some short-term opportunities, but I kid you not, my clients when I was 25 are still my clients today, on other things. And some of them became prime ministers and some of them became whatever. And somehow you end up in a place where business becomes purpose-driven, whatever your job is. And I tend to believe that if there was any reason I became successful in life, it was because I held very true to that. I held very true to the idea of, unless what I'm giving is going to make a difference, I'll wait until something I give actually makes a difference. I know that you do that very well as well, but believe it or not, if you ask me why I succeeded, that probably, and luck. and a lot of luck. I can tell you tons of stories.
And I feel like that's the people in this room, as I said before you came on stage, Mo, that's exactly what I think drives most of the people here, of what they do, how they do it. And
it's actually quite interesting, because most of the business school articles will teach you, that you have to be grandiose if you want. You have to be Steve Jobs to be making a difference. It's not true at all. I have witnessed in my life that every single one of us, from the accountant in the company all the way to the CEO, all the way to the biggest companies, if each and every one of us has that ability to make their own bit very purpose-driven by making sure that what they do makes a difference. And that's really it.
So from IBM, from the education sector and closing these deals, you end up being Chief Business Officer for Google X.
Yeah, pure luck.
Pure luck, but yeah, a little bit.
I promise you that, yeah.
Okay, little bit of luck. But then from there, where did your work on happiness begin?
I don't call that luck, actually. So that was, I think, the only bit of bad luck I had. I mean, I have always struggled, honestly, with happiness. And I don't know how many of you have experienced this. But when I came to Dubai, 1995. Even though I was very, very successful in Egypt as 6 years at IBM at the time, Egypt, you didn't really have the standard of living that you have here. And you land in Dubai and you start to suddenly have everything. And at the time, in the mid-90s, I was quite geeky at the time. So when Netscape came out, and we started to really have macros on Excel, and I always could code, I built a very simple trading system that's analogous to what you get today, but literally a scout that would go out and scout the internet for news about my stocks. and then put that put those into the populator as an Excel sheet, and then literally give me buying and selling decisions every morning that were printing.
And when was this? Like,
1996. I was printing money on demand. I kid you not. I was printing money on demand. Like literally every morning I would wake up an hour before I left home, read the sheet, just verify that the equations are accurate, then put 16 orders of 16 stocks that I promise you I did not know what they were doing. I had no idea what the company did. Okay? Didn't know what the CEO announced yesterday. I had no clue. Right? It was just mathematics. And then the market opened at 6 p.m. By 7, I would have either bought or not. I had a very strict way of buying. And by the evening, I would have printed $40,000. Literally, the system automatically will tell me, now time to sell. And what ended up happening is I started to, I don't know how you feel about this, but the more successful I became, the more miserable I became. I was really miserable. And I was almost depressed. I can probably say if I was diagnosed, I would have been diagnosed clinically depressed. But the idea was that somehow in my mind, the mix of the control being, starting to become a senior manager in my career, and the constant disappointment. I don't know how to tell you that. You buy a BMW 5 Series and then you look at the 7 Series and say, what's wrong with me, right? Even though I was driving a Fiat in Egypt, okay? And it was a very, very old Fiat, and it was really broken every other day, and it had no air conditioning in it. And Egypt, it sucks when you drive without air conditioning. But the truth is, the more successful I became, the more, instead of looking at what I've achieved, I started to look at the remaining gap. Interestingly, in our world, the remaining gap is endless. It's endless, endless. Like there are billionaires who look up to other billionaires, who look up to the real billionaires, and it's endless. So models that compare to supermodels, and it's basically constant disappointment. So I was very depressed, and I had to find a way out of that depression. And my way didn't work because, again, even though I'm speaking to you in English, what's happening inside is mathematics. So the reality is I'm very, very logical, very organized. I use I literally turn everything into math. I don't know if that's...
This morning as I arrived, he was asking me, how do I choose my outfit? And he did a mathematical equation of the amount of outfits that I had and what that meant in terms of the amount of decisions that I had to make. Like, wow, I had not given it this thought.
I panicked because, I thought I was supposed to be here at 9:30 and then the calendar says, no, you're supposed to be... Yeah. But it took me 4.5 seconds to choose my outfit, like literally, because this is the outfit, right? It's it's the same exact T-shirt 10 times and 2 color, 3. I have to admit, I'm really being very lavish now. 3 colors of jeans, right? And the mathematics of if you have 6 different tops and 3 different bottoms is quite staggering if you understand. So
yeah, everything's about math.
So in my mind, when I started to read about happiness, I needed to find happiness because I was upsetting my family.
Okay.
And I couldn't understand the thing. I literally could not understand the thing. Like, what are they talking about? Like, why are they saying say om? That really upsets me to say om. Can you tell me how the machine works and why om works? And then I'll choose if I want to say om or opatito mambo. It's my choice, right? And I struggled for 4 years, and then I started to use math, interestingly, to try and find a path to happiness. Okay, which appears to be crazy, but it worked. I found an equation that actually describes happiness accurately. Started to put that in a model, and basically discussed it with my wonderful son, who was actually human, not a cyborg, and he somehow started to develop my heart. So I will tell you openly, without that child, I'm very, 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 very heart-based now. I'm like the most loving you will ever come across, I hope. And I really feel very strongly in my feminine, much more than I am in my masculine. But I think that by age 30, 31, when I was really struggling with my happiness, I had no skills at all to reach in and get connected to that. Ali did that for me. So I would find something out, I would go to Ali, and Ali would say, oh, that's amazing. And then he always had that habit of asking me a couple of questions just to entertain me, really. It's like he wasn't like, he knew that.
How old was he when this started?
Ali started to be super unusual when he was 6. So his entire life, he spoke very little. He joked all the time. Those people, he was just constantly laughing, constantly making everyone laugh. But if you spoke about something serious, he would become super quiet, ask questions. At age 6, right? And then he would say 4 to 8 words. I promise you, I kid you not. It's 4 to 8 words, and you would go like, what? And it would completely change my life. Completely get me either to understand something I didn't understand, or to go back to the drawing board, and then he would turn around and leave. Just like that. Anyway, together we built something that was more human, and together I became very much more human. And then he died, right? So I found my path to happiness in 12 years, believe it or not. But I was very serious. I was like an Olympic champion, honestly. Like, Middle Eastern, beard, Muhammad Ali, right? And so I worked at Microsoft at the time, and I used to travel to Seattle once a month, 37 times in a row, okay? At the time, Emirates didn't fly to Seattle, so I would go from here to JFK on Delta. And I would book a Delta flight 6 hours after my arrival into JFK and barely make it, because every single time I would go to Homeland Security. Every single time, right? 37 times in a row. To the point, I was working at Microsoft at the time, reasonably senior, to the point that when I would walk into Homeland Security, the people behind the counter would go like, oh, Mr. Gates is back, right? And then they would call me to the counter and say, answer the same 10 questions we asked you last time. And I would go like, yeah, my name is this, my mother's name is this, I'm here for that, here is the letter, okay? And no dent in my happiness. I would literally sit there overjoyed, because I now knew how this works, right? And then Ali left, and he sort of taught me, okay? And by 2011, I decided I'm going to write about it. But then I kept delaying. And then, 2014, he leaves the world. In a very interesting way, leaves me a message. Or maybe I thought he left me a message. He talks to my daughter 2 weeks before he died. I think he knew that he was going to die, by the way. Should I say that? Because you guys are in Dubai, Saudi German hospital, by the way. So, so be careful. And so he calls my daughter, who he was very close to, even though she was a bit of a pain for him, but he would call her every day for an hour and take care of her. He was really the masculine figure in her life. And one day he calls her and he says, I dreamt that I was everywhere and part of everyone. And of course, later when you start to study that, that's actually a very Sufi way of defining death, to be everywhere and part of everyone. And he said, I felt so amazing that I didn't want to be back in my body. And my daughter dismissed it. And then, of course, 4 days after he died, she came and told me that he had this dream. And to my businessman's mind, remember, at that time, I had been already 9 years at Google. I was responsible for half of Google's business worldwide. We had a strategy. Google had a strategy at the time when I arrived that was called the next billion. And they were talking about the next $1 billion. I basically walked into Eric's and Larry and Sergey's office, and I said, that's the wrong strategy. It should be the next 4 billion. And I was basically talking about the next 4 billion users. I said, there are 4 billion people around the world that have no access to what we do. And so I knew how to get things to billions. I started half of Google's offices globally, 103 languages. And it's very serious engineering work, not just business. And the minute I said everywhere and part of everyone, I just thought, okay, I can do that on the internet. Consider it done. In my mind, I took it as a quote. Believe it or not, how how difficult those moments are. I said, okay, I'll make you everywhere and part of everyone. And my answer was, write down what he taught you, put it in a book. And again, because of mathematics, I said, if I reach 10 million people, 6 degrees of separation, 72 years, he will be everywhere and part of everyone. That was really my math. And I basically, I wrote the book, 4.5 months the book was written, 2.5 years of editing because I was very, very stubborn. And then it became an instant bestseller. And yes, within 8 weeks, we had reached 178 million people. 178.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So just to kind of put sort of context and sort of confirm that sort of timeline, that story. So you worked on the equation throughout your time in Google. So when I first heard about you, Mo, I kind of saw you were this kind of stressed out executive who was struggling, and therefore, and that you worked in happiness came later. But actually,
no.
the kind of happiness group, you were known in Google X as being. Like,
no, I was the happiest place in Google. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So Google was a very happy company, and I was by far the happiest place in Google, and that's why I was very successful. I mean, in all honesty, I mean, there are parts in life, and I don't know how to say this diplomatically, so I'll say it as it is. There are phases in your life when your entire value is what you can contribute, okay? And then you become responsible for humans. And then suddenly your entire value becomes what they can contribute, right? And you know, later in my career, I was responsible for regional senior VPs who are responsible for area VPs who are responsible for country managers and CEOs, and then they are responsible for teams. So if you think of yourself as a contributor, you're deluded. You have zero value in the business at all other than those people. That's the only value you bring, right? And in my mind, it became very clear, again, to the engineer's highly technical mind, when I was 31, when I started to have direct reports, that the more of a contributor I am, the more I piss them off, right? And so very quickly, I realized that my job has changed. My job is sometimes to be an advisor because of my experience and my contacts and so on. People can come to my office and say, hey, by the way, there is a certain challenge, you know, what do you think of it? But not as a dictator at all. So I literally had 2 rules in the business. And any time I hired a new senior person, I sat down and I said, well, I have 2 rules. One is he or she who carries the target makes the decisions, okay? So if you assume the target and say, Mo, I'm going to go and achieve it, you don't even have to consult me how you're going to achieve it, of course, within compliance and legal and so on, right? And the second is, I'm not responsible for the business, I'm responsible for you. You are responsible for the business, okay? Very, very simple, honestly. And people would ask, what does that mean? And I would say, look, it means I'm here to remove obstacles from your way, okay? I'm here to connect you where you need to be connected. I'm here to advise you if you ask for advice, but if you don't, I'll stay quiet. If you don't talk to me, I'm not going to reach out, okay? And if you achieve, you'll be the happiest person in the company. I will make you very, very happy, okay? And I promise you, I never promised anyone I will raise your salary or I will, you know, give you a promotion. I committed openly, I will make you happy, okay? And then what ended up happening is 3 things. One is people worked really, really hard because they were autonomous, they were empowered, they were trusted, okay? And so they achieved amazing results, okay? 2, they were happy, so they created an incredible environment around them. And 3, they got their top talented friends that were outside my company or my department, they spoke to them and said, hey, come work for Mo. It's a very, very happy place. And I promise you for years, for years and years and years, I did nothing. I'm useless, completely useless. I swear to you. No, I swear. I go to work and I just hug people and tell, amazing skill, yeah.
So in terms of from our perspective, so I learned about your work initially, it was the Stephen Bartlett podcast. Yeah. So I think, a lot of people may have heard that podcast.
Don't listen to the next one though.
I know.
8th of June, we're talking about AI. don't.
But
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to save that for the end of today's session. But from that podcast, I learned about 1 billion happy as a mum. I can't even begin to think of the pain that you went through in losing Ali, and the fact that I think it was 9 days after you started writing Soul.
17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Within a couple of weeks, you were.
I mean, I had to do the formalities and so on, but 17 days I was writing. Yeah.
To have any kind of theory of this is what creates happiness, it's awesome. To live that out after losing a child, I think for me was what, had such huge impact. And when I read Soul for Happy, you referenced Dubai quite a bit throughout that book. And I don't know if it was the regional connection or what, for whatever the reason, but I had a strange feeling that we would work together in some capacity.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, very much.
We create our own reality.
So. Yeah, well, I like to think so. And obviously with the work that we do at BSTG, we span the space of insurance, well-being, HR. So we're very, very aware of the problems that all of you face. So you guys are at the forefront of what you do. You're known as being the ambassadors for well-being and workplace wellness, and you care about all of these things. But still, I'm sure you'd say within your organisations, there's still work to be done and it's not perfect. And I was super excited at potentially meeting Mo to partner on 1 billion happy within the workplace. That's what I wanted to bring to the region.
I think you're actually underestimating the credit, because I always thought of 1 billion happy as a .org. I never thought of the impact of 1 billion happy on the workplace. You suggested that. It's a very interesting idea. So my assumption of 1 billion happy is that if the message is right, the message will continue to spread, and it's spreading. I mean, it's hard to measure exactly, but we're in the 50-some million people, not people who have watched the video. These are people that took action, right? Very, very significant if the doubling function continues. But how for 8 years now, or 5 years, how did I miss the corporate space? I have no idea, honestly. It's quite interesting that you brought it up.